Imagine waking up 1 year from now and realizing that nothing dramatic happened in your life. No sudden luck, no miracle opportunity, no radical overnight transformation, yet everything is better. Your focus is sharper, your income is higher, your confidence is stronger, and the chaos that once controlled your days no longer has power over you. This is not fantasy. This is how real change actually works. Not through massive breakthroughs, but through small, almost invisible victories repeated with intention. This book reveals a truth most people never learn. Success does not come from motivation, talent, or extreme effort. It comes from tiny wins stacked patiently over time. Wins so small they feel insignificant in the moment, yet powerful enough to quietly rewire your identity. Most people fail because they chase dramatic change. They want to transform everything at once, and when that fails, they give up entirely. This book dismantles that illusion and replaces it with a system that works even when motivation is low, time is limited, and life is messy. You will discover why the brain resists big goals, but embraces small progress, how momentum is created without force, and why consistency beats intensity every single time. Through real-life examples, behavioral psychology, and practical mental frameworks, you will see how the smallest actions shape habits, habits shape identity, and identity shapes destiny. This is not about working harder. It is about working smarter at a scale your mind can sustain. Each small victory sends a signal to your brain that you are capable, disciplined, and in control. Over time, those signals compound into confidence, clarity, and unstoppable forward motion. If you have ever felt stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated by your lack of progress, this book will change how you see effort itself. Stay with this video until the end, because what you are about to learn is not another motivational idea you will forget tomorrow. It is a quiet strategy that powerful people use without announcing it. By the time we finish, you will understand how to build massive results without burning out, quitting, or waiting for the perfect moment. This is the power of small wins, and once you see it clearly, you will never approach growth the same way again. Chapter 1. The Small Wins Framework. Why Tiny Actions Matter. The central paradox of meaningful change is that the scale of outcomes is not proportional to the size of an action. Instead, small, consistent acts accumulate into disproportionate results. Imagine a ledger where each day you credit one modest action, a page written, a 5-minute walk, a single customer outreach, and over months that ledger compounds into skill, energy, and opportunity. The brain evolved to avoid costly signals. Grand ambitions often trigger threat responses because they imply risk, potential failure, and social exposure. Tiny wins bypass that alarm system. They are small enough that the cost of trying is negligible, yet they produce immediate, testable feedback that the mind treats as success. That feedback loop is the engine of habit formation. Action creates evidence. Evidence updates self-perception. Updated self-perception makes repeating the action easier. Practically, the small wins framework starts by reframing what progress means. Replace binary metrics of success or failure with micrometrics you can achieve daily. Instead of, "I will write a book," commit to write 250 words every weekday. Instead of "get fit," commit to do 7 minutes of movement each morning. These micro-commitments are not soft. They are engineered to produce consistency. Another important design is the minimum viable action. Determine the smallest repeatable behavior that preserves the essence of the desired habit. The smallest is not triviality. It is just low enough to be immune to excuses. For teams, the same rule applies. Small process rituals, like a 5-minute daily stand-up or a shared one-line update, create alignment and momentum far more reliably than quarterly vision casting. The small wins approach also changes risk calculus. When experiments are tiny, failure is cheap and instructive, which increases the rate of learning. The practical sequence is build feedback, adjust, execute a small action, measure immediate signal. Did you complete it? What happened? And make one tiny adjustment. Over time, this iterative process reveals what scales and what stalls. Leverage compounds when small wins align with systems that amplify them. A morning writing habit paired with a public accountability post leverages social reinforcement. A 5-minute exercise habit paired with a step count challenge uses gamification to accelerate consistency. Systems thinking is a companion to small wins because systems determine whether a single behavior survives friction and life variability. Finally, the psychological payoff is profound. Small wins not only produce external progress, but they railroad identity change. Each completed action sends a quiet but cumulative message to the brain. I am someone who follows through. Identity is the long-term governor of behavior. When identity shifts from aspirational to evidentiary, when who you are is defined by what you do, behavior becomes effortless relative to willpower. Start today by picking one meaningful goal and breaking it into the single smallest action you can repeat daily. Commit to it for 30 days, measure completion, and iterate. The first 30-day cycle is mostly about proving you can do the tiny thing consistently. The second is about scaling in frequency or intensity with the same structure. Small wins are not trivial. They are strategic accelerants that change both your results and who you become. Chapter 2. Design systems, not goals. The architecture of sustainable change. Goals are attractive because they define destination, but they are inherently brittle. Once achieved, the motivational structure collapses, and until achieved, they produce anxiety. Systems, by contrast, are processes you run daily that produce desirable outcomes as a byproduct. A system for writing is a daily routine that prioritizes drafts over perfection. A fitness system is scheduling movement as a non-negotiable that adapts to travel or workload. Effective system design follows a handful of practical rules. First, simplify. Complexity kills consistency. The fewer moving parts in a system, the less cognitive bandwidth required to run it. Second, automate what you can. Automation converts intention into routine. Calendar blocks, automatic transfers to savings, or pre-made ingredients for healthy meals reduce the friction that breaks good behavior. Third, build environment-level supports. Change the physical and digital contexts to make the desired action easier and the undesired one harder. Put your running shoes by the bed, remove social media apps during work hours, or create a single work playlist that signals focus. Environment beats willpower because when the cue is clear and friction is low, following through becomes the default. Fourth, embed measurement into the system. Systems need simple, frequent signals. Completion checkboxes, a daily progress dot, or a short post-session note. Measurement is not about micromanagement. It is about data that prevents false narratives and gives you truth about frequency and quality. Fifth, design for the variable schedule problem. Life is irregular. The system must survive vacations, sickness, and high-pressure windows. Use intensity modulation rather than all-or-nothing rules. Maintain the habit at 20% intensity when time is scarce rather than dropping it completely. Sixth, create built-in recovery protocols. Systems should assume failure and include explicit restart rituals, 3-day resets, a short accountability call, or a lightweight restart checklist. These reduce the shame and inertia that make lapses spiral into abandonment. Seventh, align systems with identity signals. Choose system names and rituals that reinforce who you want to be. A writer's morning that includes coffee, a short warm-up, and a 25-minute sprint sends a different identity message than a vague work on book entry in a calendar. Eighth, leverage social architecture. Systems that include public commitments, shared rituals, or small accountability groups dramatically increase persistence because social norms and expectations raise the cost of quitting. Ninth, keep systems modular. Modular systems allow you to swap tactics while preserving the structure. If a particular running route becomes unavailable, a home-based high-intensity routine slots in without interrupting the daily movement system. Finally, iterate deliberately. Systems should be reviewed on a cadence, monthly or quarterly, with clear metrics for what to scale or prune. Use small, low-cost experiments to evolve the system rather than wholesale rewrites. The true power of systems is their durability. They continue producing outcomes even when motivation wanes, because the system is not dependent on daily inspiration, but on predictable processes. Design your life with systems first. Goals will follow as emergent properties of excellent systems. Chapter 3. The Psychology of Momentum and Identity. How small wins rewire who you are. Momentum is not metaphysical energy. It is a psychological state produced by a history of tiny confirmations that you can move forward. Psychologically, momentum lowers the perceived cost of action because each prior completion becomes evidence that future completion is both possible and likely. The brain reads this evidence as reduced risk and increased capability, which in turn lowers resistance and increases curiosity. The practical consequence is that the hardest moment is almost always the first repetition after a lapse, the restart. Once a sequence of small wins begins, inertia does the heavy lifting. Identity is the institutional memory of behavior, where habits are the specific actions you automate. Identity is the narrative you use to explain yourself. I am a runner versus I run sometimes. Small wins are the raw material that reconstructs that narrative. The mechanism is straightforward. Each tiny success updates the belief system and gradually shifts implicit assumptions about what you do and who you are. Over time, identity change becomes self-reinforcing. Actions confirm identity, and identity makes actions easier. To harness this, construct rituals that produce visible evidence for your new identity. Rituals are repeatable, symbolic acts that make abstract identity claims concrete. A daily notebook for thinkers, a weekly demo for creators, or a monthly account review for savers. Rituals make abstract change tangible and produce shareable artifacts that reinforce social identity when shared. Another psychological lever is the use of public commitment. When you state an intention publicly, publish a weekly newsletter, announce a finish date, or commit to a public metric, you transform private desire into social obligation. Public commitments change the payoff matrix because social reputation becomes a cost of non-compliance. Use this carefully. Align the commitment with realistic small wins to avoid needless exposure. Self-signaling is a subtler mechanism. Choosing actions that signal a preferred identity to yourself, buying a modest piece of equipment, scheduling a recurring calendar block with a meaningful label, or writing a short summary at the end of each session creates micro-rewards that reinforce continuation. The design of rewards matters. Immediate, intrinsic reward is most sustainable. Small wins should produce immediate internal feedback, satisfaction, reduced anxiety, increased clarity, rather than external prizes which are intermittent. Also, cultivate compassionate self-talk about progress. People often treat lapses as moral failures. Reframe them as data points. Ask what worked and what can I change instead of what's wrong with me. This reduces shame, increases learning, and accelerates restart. Finally, Plan for identity scaling. As competence increases, shift language from doing descriptors to ownership descriptors. I am someone who writes, rather than I am trying to write. Language matters because it orients future behavior. Use incremental identity prompts, small, believable identity statements you can affirm daily, and let the accumulation of tiny wins convert those statements from aspirational to factual. Momentum and identity are the psychological bedrock of durable change. They turn repeated small actions into a life that is convincingly different than the one you began with. Chapter 4. Habit Stacking and Environment Design. Make good actions inevitable. Habit stacking is the practical technique that links a new, tiny behavior to an existing, reliable routine, so the new action rides the momentum of a habit you already perform. The logic is simple. If you do X every morning, attach Y immediately after X. Over time, Y becomes automatic because the cue is immediate and predictable. Start by auditing your current daily rituals. Identify 3 anchored behaviors you never miss: brewing coffee, brushing teeth, checking messages, making the bed. For each targeted habit you want to build, choose one anchor and design a single micro-action that takes under 2 minutes. For example, if your goal is reading more, stack read 1 paragraph after pouring coffee. If your goal is mobility, stack 2 minutes of joint mobility after brushing your teeth. The micro-action must be small enough to feel trivial, yet meaningful enough to maintain identity signals. Next, design explicit cue-action reward loops. The cue is the existing habit, the action is your new tiny behavior, and the reward is immediate: satisfaction, a check mark, or a small sensory payoff. Immediate rewards are crucial because the brain discounts distant payoff heavily. The reward signals that the action was successful and increases the likelihood of repetition. Use a visible tracker, a calendar X, a habit.app, or a simple notebook entry to record completion. The act of recording often serves as its own micro-reward by converting invisible progress into visible evidence. Environment design complements stacking by removing friction for desired actions and introducing friction for undesired ones. Make the desired choice the easy default. For example, place your running shoes beside the bed, keep a healthy snack bowl visible, or pre-fill a water bottle the night before. Conversely, increase friction for distractions. Log out of social apps on your phone, store tempting items in a less convenient place, or use website blockers during focus blocks. The environment should match the meta rule. If you want the behavior to be automatic, make it the path of least resistance. Another layer is temporal scaffolding, time-boxing micro-actions into your schedule so they are non-negotiable. Calendarize the smallest form of the habit first, 5 minutes, not the ideal version. Once the micro-block is secure, scale by frequency or slight intensity increases. Use the 2-minute rule as a guardrail. When motivation is low, do exactly 2 minutes. When time allows, extend naturally. Scaling is horizontal, more frequent repeats, before vertical, longer sessions. Horizontal scaling reinforces identity faster because the brain sees consistency, whereas long sessions without consistency risk burnout. Social nudges amplify adherence. Announce your micro-commitment to a small group, join a peer accountability loop, or use public micro-updates on a private channel. The accountability need not be punitive. Simple mutual reporting sustains attention because social expectations are sticky. When you fail, apply a restart ritual that removes shame and reduces friction. A short script to accept the lapse, a 1-minute corrective action, and immediate resumption. Frequent lapses are informational. Document the context and adapt the environment, or stack until it fits real-world constraints. Build habit bundles for compound effects. A pre-work ritual that includes a 2-minute stretch, One paragraph of focused reading and a single priority task selection creates a morning cascade. Each tiny win primes the next. Over weeks, these bundles shift mood, clarity, and productivity because they accumulate microdoses of competence. Evaluate and prune monthly. Keep what triggers reliably, tweak what stalls, and drop what feels like willpower theater. Finally, remember identity engineering. Habit stacks are not merely behavioral tricks. They are statements to yourself. Each completed micro-action broadcasts a signal. I am someone who does X. Repeated over months, that signal changes self-concept and makes larger behaviors feel congruent with the new identity. Habit stacking and environment design are the practical architecture of compounding improvement. Small, deliberate, and relentlessly optimized to make good actions the default path in your daily life. Chapter 5. Feedback loops and rapid iteration. Learn faster than you fail. Feedback loops are the mechanism through which small actions generate useful information. Without timely, honest feedback, tiny wins remain anecdotal and cannot be scaled. Design each microhabit with at least one immediate signal that reports success or failure within hours or days instead of weeks or months. For a writing habit, the signal could be a completed 250-word draft and a short readability check. For a fitness habit, it could be heart rate recovery or number of repetitions. The faster the feedback, the quicker you can adapt. Use 3 classes of feedback. Direct performance metrics. Did you complete the micro-action? Proximal outcome indicators. What immediate effect did the action produce? And leading signals. Early signs that predict longer-term changes. For example, direct metric. Checkbox completed. Proximal outcome. Mood improved. Leading signal. Increased clarity in subsequent tasks. Capture feedback in a compact, consistent format. A daily 2-line log is sufficient. The micro-action completed and a 1-sentence note on what changed. This low-cost habit prevents post hoc rationalization and creates a data set from which patterns emerge. Construct experiments around your micro-actions using a testable hypothesis, a short duration, 7 to 21 days, and explicit kill rules. Hypothesis-driven micro-experiments reduce inertia by turning hope into a measurable trial. For instance, hypothesize, writing 250 words each morning will increase my weekly output by 50%, and run a 2-week test. If the data don't support the hypothesis, examine environmental friction, adjust the stack, or change the microdose. Iteration is a disciplined cycle. Act, measure, learn, adjust. Avoid perfection paralysis. Small, imperfect data beats elegant speculation. Where feedback is noisy, aggregate multiple small signals to infer trend rather than react to single outliers. Use moving averages over short windows to smooth random variance and avoid whipsaw responses. Incorporate qualitative feedback through brief stakeholder checks. When your micro-habits touch others, team rituals, clients, family, ask 1 or 2 targeted questions. What changed? What was different? And one suggestion. These external viewpoints often reveal blind spots that self-monitoring misses. Also, design negative feedback receptors, formal mechanisms to surface unhelpful consequences of a habit. For example, if a productivity micro-habit inadvertently reduces sleep, include a nightly sleep rating in your log. Rapid iteration requires psychological humility. Treat ideas as provisional and be willing to abandon them when data contradicts them. Maintain a lightweight experiment ledger that records hypotheses, dates, outcomes, and 1-sentence lessons. Chapter 6. Habit, Maintenance and Long-Term Resilience. Preventing decay and scaling wins. Sustaining small wins over years requires systems that protect against entropy. Habits decay because contexts change, novelty fades, or life stress increases. Resilience is the capacity to preserve critical micro-routines despite variability. Start with redundancy. Create at least two orthogonal cues for each habit, so if one cue fails due to travel or disruption, the other remains. For example, combine a time-based cue, morning, with a context cue, after breakfast, and a physical cue, running shoes visible. Redundancy reduces single-point failures. Second, design modular scaling ladders. A ladder defines how you add volume without breaking the system. Increase frequency first, then duration, then intensity, with built-in plateau checks. This prevents explosive scaling that collapses under life friction. Third, institutionalize restart protocols. Expect inevitable lapses and treat them as procedural interruptions, not identity negations. A standard restart script: acknowledge the lapse, perform 2 consecutive micro-actions immediately, and log a quick cause analysis, reduces the psychological drag of restarting and shortens relapse duration. Fourth, build seasonal adaptations. Life cycles, holidays, travel, work sprints require temporary habit modes. Predefine a maintenance mode that preserves the essence of the habit at reduced intensity so you sustain identity without chasing impractical targets. Fifth, maintain social anchors. Regular accountability check-ins with a partner or group provide external pressure that counteracts internal drift. When internal motivation wanes, social expectations often carry the weight. Sixth, protect keystone habits, those micro-actions that unlock many downstream benefits. Identify 1 or 2 keystones: sleep quality, movement, journaling, and prioritize them during stress because preserving these delivers disproportionate returns across cognition, mood, and energy. Seventh, automate recovery reserves. Allocate buffer time and attention for habit repair in your calendar so you can respond when friction appears without derailing other commitments. Eighth, audit at fixed intervals. Quarterly reviews of habit health with simple metrics, completion rate, perceived value, and interference factors allow you to prune dead tactics and double down on high-leverage stacks. Ninth, celebrate maintenance milestones with small rituals, weekend reflection, a modest treat, or public acknowledgement to reinforce identity and reward persistence. Finally, cultivate a long-term mindset that values margin and durability over peak performance. Habits that survive 20 years outpace bursts of activity that peak and vanish. Prioritize sustainable micro-actions you can imagine doing in years of travel, family changes, and career shifts. When you design redundancy, modular scaling, restart rituals, and social anchors into your habit architecture, small wins stop being fragile experiments and become durable engines of compounding improvement. Chapter 7. Motivation versus systems. Why willpower fails and what replaces it. Motivation feels powerful because it produces an emotional surge, but it is an unreliable fuel for sustained change. It spikes and collapses, tied to mood, novelty, and environmental cues. The practical consequence is simple. If you design your life to depend on willpower, you will fail when life becomes hard. The power of small wins comes from replacing fragile motivation with robust systems that operate independently of how you feel day to day. Start by mapping your motivation bandwidth honestly. Note the 3 times of day when you naturally have energy, the situations that reliably drain you, and the tasks that require disproportionate will. This mapping is not self-indulgent. It is the data that allows you to route your highest friction work to your energy windows and to create microsystems for low-energy periods. The next step is cue engineering. External cues transform latent intention into visible prompts. calendar blocks labeled with precise actions, a physical object placed as a reminder, a short alarm with a one-line instruction. External cues offload initiation from the mind to the environment and reduce the friction that causes tasks to collapse into later. Complement cues with tiny default actions so execution becomes effortless. Instead of exercise, the micro-action is put on running shoes and stand by the door. That single move often triggers the follow-through because it narrows the decision and creates immediate momentum. Where cues are not enough, use commitment devices. A commitment device converts future weakness into present consequence. Small monetary stakes that go to an undesirable recipient if you fail. A public promise to a group that checks weekly, or a signed agreement with a trusted friend who will call you on your lapse. The trick is to choose commitments that are salient and have meaning to you. Too trivial, and they fail to change behavior. Too punitive, and they create avoidance. Pair commitments with micro-rewards, so completion is intrinsically reinforcing. The reward can be as tiny as a checkbox that triggers a satisfying sound, a short celebratory note in a log, or a 2-minute pause to savor success. Redundancy is essential for resilience. Design at least 2 backup pathways for every critical habit, so life's variability doesn't break the chain. If weather cancels an outdoor run, a 2-minute mobility routine at home preserves the identity signal. If deep work is impossible in the morning, a 20-minute writing sprint in the evening keeps the practice alive. Redundancy preserves the psychological narrative that you are someone who shows up, which compounds identity over time. Rituals convert startup cost into a predictable sequence. A ritual is not a long ceremony. It is a brief, repeatable sequence, 3 deep breaths, a 2-line warm-up, and a 1-minute setup that signals to your brain that the behavior is beginning. Rituals reduce decision anxiety and increase the probability of entering the flow state. Keep rituals short and consistent. Their value is regularity, not theatricality. Social architecture multiplies adherence. Group norms, tiny public commitments, and accountability partners create social pressure that is both motivating and stabilizing. The social element should be supportive, not shaming. A weekly report in a small trusted group or a buddy system for micro check-ins often produces more durable adherence than solitary grit. When building teams or communities, institutionalize tiny rituals, daily check-ins that name a single completed micro-action, and public micro-celebrations that reinforce collective identity. Finally, plan for motivational droughts by maintaining a concise, vivid list of the real outcomes you care about, written in emotional, specific terms. Generic "be healthier" goals fail. Run 3 times a week so I can climb stairs without stopping when I visit my mother is motivating because it ties action to a personal narrative. When resistance rises, pair the why statement with a 2-minute fallback action. A ritual you can execute even when dragged, which preserves momentum and prevents relapse. Over time, these systems convert sporadic bursts of enthusiasm into predictable, compounding progress because they remove the need for daily heroism and replace it with predictable, tiny wins that quietly rewire identity. Chapter 8. Scaling small wins, from micro habits to organizational change. Small wins scale, not just in individuals, but in organizations, when the same principles, systems, redundancy, rituals, and feedback are applied at group level. The key insight is that the unit of scaling is not merely repetition, but coordination, aligning many micro-habits so their aggregate effect produces strategic change. Begin at the team level by defining one shared micro-ritual that everyone can perform daily with minimal friction, an opening line in the morning stand-up that names the single tangible outcome each person will produce that day. a 2-minute customer touchpoint summary, or a short, what I learned sentence posted to a shared channel. Shared micro-rituals create synchronized micro-wins. The psychological payoff is twofold. Individuals experience frequent competence confirmations, and the team benefits from increased predictability and information flow. Design systems for adoption that are explicit and non-negotiable. For organizational habits to stick, minimize optionality early. Implement short, fixed-duration experiments with clear starting rules, completion criteria, and a modest review window. Paper the expectations. One page that explains the ritual, the rationale, and the measurement method. Make the experiment visible. Dashboards, a weekly micro-win bulletin, or a modest scoreboard, so the organization sees aggregate progress and learns where friction lives. Use automation to remove tiny operational drags that kill good intent. Scheduling tools for recurring micro-check-ins, template messages for standard updates, and lightweight integrations that reduce copy-paste work. Automation ensures that the administrative cost of the new micro-habit is minimal for every participant. Feedback at scale must be rapid and local. Centralized, delayed reports kill momentum. Instead, design short loops where teams measure immediate signals, completion rates, short qualitative notes, daily, and aggregate weekly. Use micro-postmortems after 2-week sprints to surface practical impediments and to iterate on the ritual. Iteration must be low friction. Change one small thing at a time. Measure impact for a fixed short horizon, and revert or adopt based on simple criteria. Culture change is often mistaken for a grand narrative exercise. In reality, it emerges from repeated local behaviors that are visible and celebrated. Reward systems should privilege consistent micro-actions over rare heroic acts. Formal recognition programs that spotlight reliable adherence. The teammate who posted a micro-learning note every weekday for a month. Reinforce the social norms you want to propagate. Importantly, avoid reward inflation. Recognition should be meaningful but proportionate to the effort, so intrinsic motivation remains central. Leadership must model modesty and continuity. When leaders visibly perform the micro-rituals they ask of others and publicly discuss the small failures and adjustments, it signals safety and normalizes imperfection. This lowers the fear of trying and increases early adoption. For scale, create modular habit bundles across the organization, core rituals for everyone, role-specific micro-habits for different functions, and node-level experiments for sub-teams. Modular design allows rapid transfer between contexts. A sales micro-ritual can be adapted for customer success with minimal friction because the underlying structure, one small daily action, one immediate signal, and a short weekly review, remains constant. Manage change velocity carefully. Too many new micro-habits at once fragments attention and reduces adherence. Introduce one visible micro-ritual per quarter and ensure prior rituals are stable before adding new ones. Finally, measure the organizational return using simple metrics tied to meaningful outcomes. Improvements in cycle time, increased customer touchpoints, reduction in errors, or incremental revenue per active micro-ritual participant. Aggregate small, consistent improvements across teams, and the cumulative effect will dwarf sporadic big-bet initiatives because systems scale via compounding behaviors. The organizational advantage of small wins is not merely operational efficiency. It is the creation of a culture where continuous improvement is ordinary and where identity shifts from "we try initiatives" to "we are a team that consistently progresses through tiny wins." When many people align on tiny, repeatable actions and leadership preserves the conditions for persistence, small wins become the engine of transformational, Durable change. Chapter 9. The compound momentum. How tiny wins multiply over time. Small wins are useful because they create moments of confirmation, but their true power lies in how those confirmations accumulate into exponential change. Compound momentum is not mystical. It is a predictable mathematical and psychological process where repeated small edges produce outsized outcomes because each success makes the next success more likely. To use this force deliberately, you must design for three things simultaneously: frequency of wins, leverage of each win, and preservation of gains through friction controls. Frequency is the numerator, how often a confirmatory event happens. Leverage is the multiplier, how much each win increases capacity, resources, or credibility. Friction control is the denominator, what drains momentum between wins, such as decision fatigue, interruptions, or conflicting incentives. The first practical move is to choose micro-actions that are high frequency and low friction. A daily 2-minute practice that produces an immediate signal scales far better than a weekly 4-hour session that requires scheduling energy and logistics. Frequency builds a history. History becomes evidence. Evidence rewires expectations. Expectation shifts change behavior organically. When you have 30 days of consistent micro-behaviors behind you, the question, "Will I do it?" is replaced by, "How will I fit it in?" That linguistic flip is the moment momentum begins compounding. Leverage matters because not all wins are equal. Design micro-actions that create multiplier effects. A well-chosen micro-action produces side effects that accelerate other outcomes. For example, a 5-minute morning review that identifies the single most important task often increases the odds of finishing a high-leverage project because focus reorients energy. Similarly, a daily habit of sending one short outreach email can produce audience-building feedback loops and small sales. Each email compounds social proof and professional opportunity. When selecting micro-actions, ask, does this tiny thing change future states disproportionately? Favor actions with durable downstream effects over ones that only feel productive in the moment. Preservation of gains requires attention to the leak points. Momentum leaks through decisions, context changes, and cognitive load. Combat leaks with 3 practical mechanisms. First, lock in structural supports that persist independently of willpower, recurring calendar blocks, automated reminders, and physical cues positioned to trigger behavior. Second, create buffer reserves that absorb shocks, time buffers in your schedule, small financial reserves to prevent urgent interruptions, and redundant cues so a single disrupted routine does not collapse the whole system. Third, practice ritualized repairs. When momentum dips, follow a predetermined restart sequence. Acknowledge the lapse, perform an immediate micro-action, and log one learning, so restarts are fast and shame-free. Measurement is the compass of compounding momentum. Choose simple metrics that track frequency and leverage without causing analysis paralysis. Frequency metrics are completion counts, days in a row, weekly completions, or percentage of days met. Leverage metrics are small leading indicators that correlate with important outcomes. Weekly draft outputs for a writing project, number of meaningful conversations for networking, or customer responses for a sales funnel. Use moving averages to smooth noise and focus on trends, rather than single-day variance. A small visible dashboard that updates automatically is a remarkable force multiplier. It turns private micro-actions into public signals which, through social accountability and curiosity, make continuation more likely. Scaling compound momentum requires careful sequencing. Begin with horizontal scaling. Increase frequency before vertical scaling. Increase intensity. Horizontal scaling reinforces identity because repetition is the strongest teacher. Vertical scaling risks collapse because it raises friction before the system is robust. Once the habit is stable, introduce micro improvements. Add one extra repetition per week, increase the minimum by 20%, or combine micro actions into a short cluster that delivers greater leverage. Treat each scale step as a micro experiment with defined duration and kill criteria. If a scale step causes completion rates to fall, revert and adjust the environment or cue. Social dynamics accelerate or decelerate compounding. Small wins are contagious when visible. Use lightweight public sharing to amplify effects. A weekly one-sentence progress update to a small group, a shared spreadsheet for teammates, or a short public post that records modest progress. Social visibility should be designed to produce constructive feedback, not performative pressure. Choose communities where improvement is normal and failure is viewed as data. Presence in such groups increases the rate of useful experiments and introduces collective leverage. Others' micro wins can be repurposed for your context. Beware of common distortions that masquerade as momentum. First, vanity wins. Activities that feel productive but do not move the needle create the illusion of progress and drain time. Measure ruthlessly to expose vanity and prune it. Second, momentum without direction is noise. Frequent wins must align with a coherent, higher-level aim. Periodically audit your micro-actions against the strategic outcome you want. Third, over-optimization is a hidden trap. Chasing perfect metrics or minute improvements can stall forward motion. Use a two-tier rhythm, tactical daily micro-tracking and a monthly strategic audit to keep detail from becoming paralysis. Narrative scaffolding strengthens compounding by knitting discrete wins into a coherent story. Humans encode progress through stories. Write a weekly one-paragraph reflection that links 3 micro-wins to a single emergent theme: improved clarity, growing confidence, or expanding network. These narratives do 2 things. They extract lessons that guide future experiments, and they create identity language that converts behavior into self-definition. Over months, a sequence of such reflections becomes an archive of evidence you can revisit in low motivation periods. Finally, align incentives across time. Immediate rewards should be intrinsic and visible. Long-term rewards are the emergent outcomes you design your system to produce. Use micro-rewards to preserve short-term adherence. Small sensory pleasures, check marks, or short celebrations. And use public milestones, a small parade of acknowledgements, a modest treat, to mark intermediate achievements that sustain morale. The combination of immediate satisfaction and deferred meaningful outcomes is the psychological engine that keeps compound momentum running. Compound momentum is not accidental, it is engineered. Frequency creates the history, leverage multiplies effects, friction control preserves gains, measurement guides decisions, and social structures amplify results. Design micro-actions that connect into systems, pick small wins with cascading benefits, automate supports that survive life's disruption, and document progress with simple metrics and narrative notes. Over months and years, the accumulation becomes visible. Small, nearly invisible choices transform into clearly superior abilities, relationships, and opportunities. Start today by identifying one tiny action that produces both a daily completion signal and a downstream leverage effect. Do it tomorrow morning, and let compound momentum quietly reshape what you thought was possible. Chapter 10. Mastery through micro-practice. Turning tiny wins into expertise. Mastery is rarely a single epiphany. It is the outcome of millions of small, well-directed repetitions that refine skill, intuition, and judgment. The advantage of tiny wins is that they make those repetitions psychologically sustainable and operationally tractable. If you wish to move from competent to exceptional in any domain, design micro-practice loops that target the smallest meaningful component of the skill and repeat it with disciplined feedback. The first step is decomposition. Break down the complex skill into elemental sub-skills that can be practiced in under 10 minutes. A public speaker practices a single opening line cadence. A writer refines the craft of a single paragraph. A programmer drills a specific algorithmic pattern. Micro-practice reduces cognitive load and isolates variables so you can improve one thing without the noise of entire system complexity. Second, create high-quality feedback channels. Practice without feedback is ritual. Practice with honest, fast feedback is the path to adaptation. Use objective measures where possible: time to completion, error rates, clarity scores, or design short, focused review sessions with a mentor or peer. When quantitative feedback is unavailable, use a two-question qualitative check. Did this attempt produce the desired effect? And what one change would increase the likelihood of success next time? Answer those quickly and iterate. Third, set deliberately challenging but achievable micro-goals that nudge your edge without breaking flow. The goal is progressive overload at micro-scale, slight increase in speed, a small improvement in accuracy, a tiny expansion in complexity. This principle prevents stagnation while preserving habit consistency. Mastery grows when you repeatedly operate just beyond current ability in short bursts. Fourth, schedule distributed practice rather than massed sessions. Cognitive science shows spacing practice over time enhances long-term retention and transfer. Short, frequent micro-practices across days and weeks embed procedural memory better than single marathon rehearsals. Build a calendar of micro-sessions and protect them like appointments. Consistency over months produces surprising competence. Fifth, prioritize reflection and consolidation. After micro-practice, record a one-paragraph summary of what changed and why. This reflection converts raw repetition into conceptual understanding, which is necessary for flexible application beyond rote performance. Consolidation rituals, a brief write-up, an audio memo, or a short annotated example, serve as the connective tissue from practice to adaptive skill. Sixth, use variability to promote transfer. Once a micro-skill is stable, practice it in slightly different contexts, so the brain abstracts the underlying pattern rather than memorizing a single sequence. A salesperson practicing objection responses should rehearse with different product scenarios and differing customer temperaments. Variability prevents brittle competence and builds robust expertise that adapts to real-world unpredictability. Seventh, leverage the social multiplier. Teaching a micro-skill to another person forces clarity and deepens your own mastery. Create brief peer-teaching exchanges where each person demonstrates a micro-skill, receives 15 minutes of feedback, and repeats. This triadic cycle, do, receive, teach, accelerates insight because explaining reveals hidden gaps and consolidates pattern recognition. Eighth, protect margin for deliberate practice amid busyness. Mastery demands repetition over years. Preserve an inviolate micro-practice slot and a modest accountability mechanism, a coach, a small group, or a public log, to prevent erosion by urgent tasks. Fractional, steady investment compounds. 15 minutes daily for a year dwarfs intermittent multi-hour sessions in terms of cumulative improvement. Ninth, design failure-tolerant experiments. Risk-taking is necessary for advancement. Craft micro-experiments where failure is cheap and instructive. For creative work, publish early drafts publicly to collect real-world signals. For technical skill, Build deliberately broken prototypes to stress test assumptions. The smaller the unit of failure, the faster you learn and the less identity is threatened by mistakes. 10th, track leading indicators of mastery rather than distant outcomes. Instead of obsessing over fame, revenue, or a single high-stakes performance, measure proxies that predict long-term growth, weekly micro-practice completion rate, incremental improvements in difficulty, ratio of practice to feedback, and the number of contexts in which a pattern succeeds. These signals guide adjustment faster than distant metrics and keep motivation aligned with process. Finally, integrate mastery into life-level systems. Expertise should not be a separate silo, but an integrated organ of your daily routine. Micro-practice stacks attached to morning rituals, quick feedback exchanges in weekly reviews, and visible progress artifacts that remind you why the tiny work matters. Mastery is not heroic, it is habitual. When micro-practice, disciplined feedback, distributed scheduling, and social teaching combine, tiny wins aggregate into the deep, transferable competence we call mastery. The remarkable outcome is that what once felt impossible becomes inevitable because the system converts modest repetition into elegant skill. Conclusion: the quiet architecture of big results. The power of small wins is not inspirational fluff. It is a replicable design for sustained improvement. Tiny, consistent actions change identity, create momentum, and compound into outcomes that once seemed attainable only through genius or luck. The practical path is clear. Choose the smallest meaningful action, attach it to reliable cues, measure immediate signals, iterate quickly, and protect redundancy for resilience. Scale those micro-habits into systems that persist through life's variability and multiply them through social and organizational structures when appropriate. Mastery itself is the natural endpoint of disciplined micro-practice combined with honest feedback and deliberate scaling. Start today with one tiny, non-negotiable action you can repeat tomorrow. Protect it, track it, teach it. Over months and years, the accumulation of these modest victories will rewrite your life in ways dramatic yet quietly earned. Small wins are the slow currency of greatness. Use them and let time do the heavy lifting.